Next up, we have attorney-turned-Silver Spring chocolatier, Puja Satiani.
Thank you, Pete, for the introduction. As you heard, I'm Puja, and tonight I am here to strongly suggest that you eat chocolate, which I don't think is too much to ask. As you will hear soon, there's a reason it's in quotes. And lastly, as a teaser, I will address the long-debated question of whether chocolate really is an aphrodisiac. All right. So we start with chocolate on the one hand, and then what I call the faux stuff, faux chocolate or really candy. There have to be certain ingredients in a product before that product legally can be called chocolate. But my argument tonight is that there are ingredients that are allowed that you don't want in your chocolate. And I'm going to tell you how you can tell the difference between chocolate and then the candy. 3 ways: ingredients, taste, and price. They generally play off each other. So sometimes some chocolate brands will actually, to keep costs low and prices low, will take out ingredients that are natural to chocolate, put fillers in instead, and that certainly affects the taste, and you'll actually notice it on the ingredient label. For instance, this is the label for a dark chocolate raspberry truffle made by a well-known international chocolate brand. You see palm oil, you see high fructose corn syrup, you see some other interesting ingredients as well, and I will leave it up to you as to whether that's what you want in your chocolate. On the other hand, if we're talking about a piece of fine chocolate, for example, dark chocolate, what you should have on the ingredient label are cacao beans or cacao mass. That is what's used to make, that's what chocolate is made from. You're gonna see cocoa butter, again, that's natural to where chocolate is made from. You'll see some sugar, and you'll see trace amounts of other ingredients, but you shouldn't see oils or other fillers. The second way that I mentioned was taste. Again, when you bite into a piece of chocolate, it should literally melt on your tongue. You shouldn't have to do a lot of chewing. There should be absolutely no waxy aftertaste either. And if there is a waxy aftertaste, it's because likely there are fillers in that product that you're eating. The third way that you can tell is price. And the reason that I say price is because fine chocolate does go for a premium. Chocolate, even though it's been made for centuries and technologies have evolved, largely a lot of it's still done by hand. For instance, you may know that chocolate comes from the cacao bean. Cacao can only be grown in certain parts of the world, 20 degrees north and 20 degrees south of the equator. So you're going to be limited to Mexico, parts of Central and South America, parts of Africa and Asia, and in smaller quantities, it is grown in Hawaii. Where it does begin, as I mentioned, is cacao. So you have a cacao pod on a cacao tree, which is what you see here. Many of the pictures you're about to see that are coming in the next few slides are pictures from my trip, my crowdfunding trip, thanks to many of you who sponsored last year, to the jungles of southern Belize. Cacao pod, as I mentioned, is where it starts. These have to be harvested off the tree by hand so the tree can continue to produce more cacao. When you crack open that pod, you have what's called cacao pulp. The pulp then surrounds the beans that are used to make chocolate. The pod has anywhere between 40 to 50 beans, and it can take anywhere from 400 to 500 beans to make just a pound of chocolate, depending on the type of chocolate that's being made. The pulp that you just saw, that doesn't look very pretty, but that's how chocolate actually starts out. So the pulp that you saw and the beans are put into wooden bins to ferment. This is where the cacao beans really start to develop their flavor. Before then, they just taste tangy, but no chocolate flavor at all. This takes several days. After fermenting, again, you have to dry. That takes several days as well. The best way to do it is outdoors. You see it's being done on a large scale outdoors, but still being protected from the rain. Again, the beans have to be rotated by hand throughout the process to make sure everything is dried evenly and you don't have mold growing on your beans. The next stage after drying is roasting. Roasting is another part of the phase where the beans develop some of their chocolate flavor. Here it's being done on a smaller scale on what's called a comal at a cacao farmer's home. On a larger scale, it can be done in a coffee roaster or even a special oven. Once you break open the cacao beans, you have what are called nibs. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. You can eat them raw, put them in your oatmeal or on a salad, but they're bitter at that point. If you want to turn them into chocolate, on a sort of oversimplified way of putting it, you take the nibs, you add sugar, put them through several machines like this, you get liquid dark chocolate. So you've heard from Again, a very high level of cacao being taken from the tree, transformed into chocolate, something you pick up at your grocery store. You see how labor intensive it is, and I'm sure you've heard that the crop isn't necessarily plentiful. So you understand why fine chocolate goes for a premium. Sadly, over the last few years, having become a chocolatier, I've talked to a lot of folks who kind of run the other direction when you mention chocolate because they think it's really bad for them. But I think a lot of the problem is people don't understand that fine chocolate, and a little bit of fine chocolate goes a very long way, and that there are things that people want to avoid in their diet that make them want to avoid chocolate. For instance, people say they don't want to eat chocolate because it has cholesterol. Now, if we're talking about a bar of dark chocolate, for instance, no fillings or no soft fillings or anything, that should not have any cholesterol in it. Milk chocolate and white chocolate are the exception. Again, check the ingredient labels. The other reason people tell me that they avoid chocolate is because it has dairy and they're avoiding dairy. Again, if we're talking about a bar of dark chocolate, shouldn't have any dairy in it at all. If you see cocoa butter on the ingredient label, as I mentioned earlier, cocoa butter is actually natural to the cocoa bean. It has nothing to do with dairy at all. So you're safe there. Milk chocolate and white chocolate are the exception though. And then finally, is chocolate an aphrodisiac? Some studies suggest that it is. Some studies suggest that it is not. But in terms of a solid link based on research, there is no such link. Sorry to disappoint you guys. I do, though, however, have anecdotal evidence. Meet my friend, not personal evidence, meet my friend, oh, dang. Meet my friend Eladio, a cacao farmer I met in Belize, spent a good amount of time with. Look at how happy he is, first of all. He's on a cacao farm all day long. While I was there, I learned that he and his wife have 15 children. So, up to you to decide whether it has that effect. Thank you.